I talk a lot about how good iPhones are to use in a variety of ways, including movies, but today I want to talk about why you don't want to use an iPhone, especially shooting a movie. Well, first and foremost, while I do, again, really like iPhones, when you're doing something that's long format and you're shooting a lot and for a long period of time, in my experience, it can be unreliable. Not only do you get phone calls or text messages, yeah, of course you can turn all that off, turn notifications off and go into airplane mode. It's just that the apps crash. Even reliable ones like Blackmagic, they tend to crash. They're just overall unreliable. Again, what I'm talking about is for all day shooting. I just don't think phones are designed for long form content, because when you're shooting a movie, you're shooting for minimum 7 or 8 days. Now, whether you do that in a row is another story. I mean, most indie films I've worked on shoot for 2 to 3 weeks. And so if you're going to use a phone, you've really got to have more than one phone. I remember the filmmakers down in New Zealand who made Blue Moon. They shot that on an iPhone 7 at the time, and I'm pretty sure they had at least 2 phones, but they may have had 3. And now I don't know with the most recent Danny Boyle movie how many phones they're using, but again, phones can be very unreliable. And so to me, that is a big negative when you're shooting a movie, and especially if you're putting any kind of money into it. I don't trust phones for that. Never fails when you're recording a video. Got a guy over here with a leaf blower or something. It just never freaking fails. Goodness gracious. Speaking of shooting movies, every time I've shot a movie, you got to have bribe money with you to go give a guy 20 bucks. Now, I'm not going to bribe someone for a YouTube video, but got to have that money ready because inevitably someone will turn that on. But anyway, I digress. Continuing along, and this is related to a phone being unreliable, and that is that phones overheat. And they overheat very quickly and very easily. Even with the modern iPhones, the latest one, the 16 Pro Max I have, if it is at all hot outside, it will overheat in about 10 or 15 minutes. And especially if you're shooting in the sun itself. And it'll even overheat in normal temperatures, 70, 80 degrees if you're in the sun. And so that is a big problem. It goes back to having other phones with you, multiple phones, because if you don't, you are going to have trouble. And if your phone overheats, just like with any camera, I mean, back in the day, Red cameras overheated all the time. Sony cameras, when the first Sony mirrorlesses came out, they overheated a lot. I had a Canon 7D, it overheated all the time, and they just shut down. The iPhone will actually shut down and it will dim the screen and you won't be able to shoot anymore. This guy's over here right by where I'm shooting. I'm in the middle of nowhere, I thought anyway, but hey, here we go. I did a short film years ago called Miranda, and learned the hard way on that shoot. We were shooting during the summer, how easily phones overheat. I only had one phone on that job, and I had to take the time when the phone overheated to turn it off and let it cool down. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to cool down. So if you're on a shoot with a crew and your phone overheats, that's a problem. And so unreliable, overheating, 2 big issues with shooting a movie on a phone. Now, another one I've had trouble with, especially using accessories, is battery. They eat up battery. Like right now with my 16 Pro Max, if I use any sort of USB-C hub going out to an SSD or anything else, like even a microphone, etc., it just drains the phone very quickly. And if you're on a long shoot, again, shooting a movie, you're going to shoot 8, 10, 12, 16, heck, 20 hours some days. That really presents a problem. Not only is your phone going to be on pretty much the whole time, because it's not just when you're shooting. You got to have the phone on to have a monitor to see when you're lighting, to see whatever you're doing. You have to have the phone on. The rolling part, the actual recording part, is a small percentage of the time your phone is on. It may take you an hour to light a scene or something. And so it just eats up battery life. Then speaking of that, you're using an external monitor and that'll have a battery. And so if you are connecting all that through the phone, it really draws the battery down. Now today, you can use big batteries. You can connect it like a small rig battery or the big Anton Bauer style or V-mount batteries. That is pretty cool. But again, that gets kind of cumbersome. I think most people shooting a movie on a phone are probably not going to do that. although it is an option. So you got to use a rig and you can't keep the setup as minimal. And then when you're shooting 4K and ProRes and you're shooting Apple Log, all that is very intensive, processor intensive on the phone. And so it just really adds up. And in the end, the battery life is not helpful at all. It kind of reminds me in a weird way of the Blackmagic pocket cameras and such, which are such good cameras, but if you're just using the small battery that you would normally use with the camera, it lasts like 45 minutes. Now, I think you'll get more than that out of the phone, but if you got it rigged up with accessories, you may not actually. You might get an hour or 2 hours. One other thing I should mention is, in my experience, when you're using a battery, sometimes it does make the phone hotter. When we go back to overheating, then you're causing more trouble that way. So again, for doing long form content, where you're shooting all day, all night, you're gonna have to have a battery. And for some people, that's not really a lot of fun. So while I really am a big proponent of shooting on iPhones, if you watch this channel, you know that. But for long form, for movies, they're probably not the best choice. However, they do work very well as a B camera or for insert shots and that kind of thing. I actually have a movie coming out soon where I used an iPhone quite a bit as a second unit camera and as a B camera, doing macro shots, insert shots, etc. And it worked really well for that. And so in my opinion, that's a great way to do it. However, of course, you can shoot a movie on an iPhone. A lot of people have done it. And so to show both sides of the story, in my next video, I'll talk about why you should use a phone.